What if you were torn from everything you knew, your home, your faith, your very name, and thrust into a glittering empire that demanded you bow to its gods or lose your life? In the shadow of Babylon's towering palaces, where the clash of swords and the lure of power threatened to erase a young man's identity, 4 teenagers stood defiant, their hearts ablaze with a courage that would shake kingdoms and reveal a God who never abandons his own. This is the story of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, a tale of unyielding faith, divine favor, and a resolve that turned captives into conquerors, proving that even in the heart of exile, God's light shines brightest. Step into the life of Daniel, where a single choice sparked a legacy that still inspires today. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. Jerusalem, the city of God's chosen people, its walls trembling under the might of Babylon's armies. The temple, the heart of worship, plundered, its sacred vessels carted off to a foreign land to adorn the shrine of a pagan deity. This was no mere military conquest. It was a spiritual assault, a moment when the world seemed to turn upside down for God's people. Yet, in the midst of this upheaval, the Lord was at work, sovereignly orchestrating events to fulfill his purposes, even through the hands of a heathen king. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they will teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Imagine the weight of this moment for these young men, torn from their homes, their families, their temple, and thrust into the glittering, seductive world of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar's court was a place of opulence and power, but also of idolatry and compromise. These youths, handpicked for their intelligence, appearance, and potential, were to be molded into servants of the Babylonian Empire, their identities reshaped to fit a foreign agenda. Yet, beneath the surface of this calculated assimilation, God was setting the stage for a testimony of faithfulness that would echo through the ages. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Here we meet 4 young men, likely in their teens, noble sons of Judah, their names rich with meaning, each a declaration of faith in the God of Israel. Daniel, God is my judge; Hananiah, Yahweh has been gracious; Mishael, who is what God is? Azariah, Yahweh has helped. But in an act of cultural erasure, their names were stripped away, replaced with titles honoring Babylonian gods. Daniel became Belteshazzar, linked to the god Bel; Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, names tied to Babylonian deities. This was no mere administrative change, it was a deliberate attempt to sever their connection to their heritage, their faith, their God. Yet, these young men carried within them a resolve that no new name could erase, a faith that would shine like a beacon in the darkness of exile. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank, therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Consider the courage of this moment. Daniel, a captive in a foreign land, surrounded by the grandeur of Babylon's palace, faced a choice. The king's food and wine were luxuries, a privilege offered to the elite, yet they likely violated Jewish dietary laws or were dedicated to idols, making them an affront to God's holiness. To partake would be to compromise, to blend into the culture that sought to redefine him. But Daniel purposed in his heart, a phrase that pulses with conviction. This wasn't a fleeting decision or a moment of defiance, it was a settled resolve, a line drawn in the sand of his soul. He would not defile himself. This choice wasn't about food alone, it was about identity, allegiance, and trust in the God who had not abandoned his people, even in exile. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. See the hand of God at work, weaving favor into the fabric of Daniel's life. Ashpenaz, the chief official, was no ordinary overseer. He held the power to enforce the king's will, yet he regarded Daniel with kindness. This was no coincidence, it was divine orchestration. But Ashpenaz's fear was real. Refusing the king's provisions could be seen as rebellion, and failure to produce healthy, capable servants could cost him his life. The stakes were high, not just for Daniel but for those around him. Yet, Daniel's faith didn't waver. He approached the situation with wisdom, not confrontation, trusting that God would honor his obedience. This final note carries profound weight. Daniel's faithfulness in chapter 1 was not a fleeting act but the foundation of a life that would span decades, serving under multiple kings, from Nebuchadnezzar to Cyrus. Daniel's resolve, his unyielding refusal to compromise his faith in the face of a foreign empire's demands, ignited a legacy that would carry him through trials unimaginable, blazing furnaces, dens of ravenous lions, and visions that pierced the veil of time itself. This is no mere story of a young man's choice. It is a resounding declaration of God's unshakable sovereignty, his boundless provision, and his power to uphold those who dare to stand for him above all else. In a world that relentlessly seeks to mold us, to soften our convictions for the sake of acceptance, Daniel's courage calls us to anchor our hearts in unwavering commitment. Where is God summoning us to stand resolute? His example urges us to trust in divine provision, to live as radiant witnesses of God's glory, transforming the courts of this world. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams that troubled his spirit, and sleep fled from him. The mighty king of Babylon, ruler of an empire stretching across the ancient world, tossing in his opulent palace, his mind haunted by visions he could neither grasp nor dismiss. The images were vivid, cosmic, weighty with meaning, a message from beyond, unsettling the heart of a man accustomed to absolute control. So the king summoned his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, commanding them not only to interpret his dream but to reveal its very content. Tell me what I saw, he demanded, his voice edged with menace, or you will be cut to pieces, and your houses reduced to rubble. The stakes were life and death, the challenge impossible, for no human wisdom could pierce the veil of a king's hidden dream. Yet, in this moment of royal desperation, God was already weaving a story of divine revelation, one that would unveil his sovereignty over empires and eternity itself. The Chaldeans, trembling before Nebuchadnezzar's wrath, admitted their limits. No man on earth can do what the king asks, they pleaded, for no king, however great, has ever demanded such a thing. Their confession laid bare the frailty of human wisdom, their occult arts powerless before the mysteries of heaven. Enraged, the king issued a decree to execute all the wise men of Babylon, a sweeping judgment that ensnared even Daniel and his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, though they were not among those initially summoned. When Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, came to carry out the order, Daniel responded with wisdom and tact, asking why the decree was so urgent. Learning of the king's impossible demand, he boldly requested time, promising to reveal both the dream and its meaning. This was no reckless boast, it was an act of audacious faith, a young exile staking his life on the God who unveils secrets. Daniel returned to his house and shared the crisis with his friends, urging them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that they and the other wise men might not perish. Together, they lifted their hearts in prayer, not in panic, but in profound trust, seeking the one who holds the keys to all knowledge. That night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. A divine answer breaking through the darkness. His response was not pride or relief alone, but worship. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, he declared, for wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and seasons, he removes kings and raises up kings, he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things, he knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. Daniel's song of praise was a testament to a God who is not distant but near, not silent but speaking, sovereign over the rise and fall of empires, and faithful to those who seek him. Standing before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel disclaimed any personal power. No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery, he said, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. With humility and boldness, Daniel unveiled the dream, a colossal statue, its head of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet a brittle mix of iron and clay. Then, a stone, cut without human hands, struck the statue at its feet, shattering it to dust, while the stone grew into a mountain that filled the earth. The vision was majestic, terrifying, eternal in scope, a divine tapestry of history's unfolding. Daniel's interpretation was precise, God-breathed, and unshakable. The statue's head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar himself, his Babylonian empire radiant with power and glory. The silver chest and arms signified a lesser kingdom to follow, the Medo-Persian Empire, strong yet inferior in splendor. The bronze belly and thighs foretold Greece, swift and expansive under Alexander the Great. The iron legs represented Rome, unyielding in strength, crushing all before it. But the feet, part iron, part clay, spoke of a divided kingdom, strong yet fragile, unable to hold together. And then, the stone, not crafted by human hands, but by God himself, smashed the statue, obliterating every trace of earthly power. This stone was God's eternal kingdom, unshakable, indestructible, destined to stand forever, filling the earth with his glory. Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man alive, fell on his face before Daniel, awestruck. "Truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets," he declared, exalting Daniel with gifts and authority, making him ruler over the province of Babylon and chief over all its wise men. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were also elevated, their faithfulness rewarded alongside Daniel's. But this was no mere personal triumph, it was a declaration of God's dominion over history. The dream revealed that empires, however mighty, are fleeting, gold fades to silver, bronze to iron, and all to dust before the eternal kingdom of God. For the Jewish exiles, this vision was a lifeline of hope, assuring them that their God was not defeated, that their suffering was not the final word, and that his reign would outlast every human power. The story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream pulses with timeless truth. It beckons us to trust the God who sees the end from the beginning, who holds the rise and fall of nations in his hands. In a world of shifting powers, where leaders boast and systems crumble, we are called to anchor our hope in the stone that becomes a mountain, God's kingdom, eternal and unshaken. Daniel's faith challenges us. Where are we tempted to trust in human wisdom or power? How can we, like him, seek God in the face of impossible odds, trusting him to reveal what we cannot see? His courage in the king's court, his prayer in the face of death, and his humility in giving God all glory invite us to live as witnesses of a greater kingdom. This account is a clarion call to stand firm, to pray boldly, and to trust that the God who unveiled mysteries to Daniel is the same God who guides our lives, turning our trials into testimonies of his sovereign power. Let Daniel's story inspire us to live with eyes fixed on the eternal, knowing that no earthly empire can rival the glory of the one who reigns forever. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon, where Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego are in charge. This is the scene, a colossal statue, 90 feet tall, gleaming in the Babylonian sun, a monument to human pride and power. This was no mere decoration, it was Nebuchadnezzar's defiant answer to the dream God had revealed through Daniel, a vision that foretold his empire's fall. Instead of humbling himself before the God who reigns over kings, Nebuchadnezzar crafted an idol of gold, demanding absolute allegiance from all. Heralds proclaimed his decree, when the sound of horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery rang out, every person, nobles, governors, judges, and people of every nation, must fall down and worship the image. The penalty for refusal was clear, a blazing furnace, its flames a terrifying promise of death. In this moment, the stage was set for a clash between earthly power and divine faithfulness, a trial that would reveal the unshakable courage of three young men and the nearness of a God who walks through fire. Among the throng summoned to bow were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah by their Hebrew names, young exiles who had already proven their devotion to God in Babylon's court. Their faith, forged in the small act of refusing the king's food, now faced a test of ultimate stakes. The music played, a cacophony of instruments signaling the moment of submission, and the crowd fell as one, faces to the ground, yielding to the king's command. But three figures stood tall, unshaken, their silhouettes stark against the sea of bowed heads. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to kneel, their allegiance reserved for the God of Israel alone. Their stand was not mere defiance, it was a declaration of trust in a God whose power outshines any idol, whose presence outweighs any threat. To bow would be to betray the one who had sustained them in exile, and they would not, could not, compromise. Certain Chaldeans, eager to curry favor, reported their disobedience to Nebuchadnezzar. Enraged, the king summoned the three, his face a mask of fury. "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up?" he demanded, offering them one last chance to comply. "If you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?" His words dripped with arrogance, a challenge to the very God who had revealed his dream's fleeting glory. But the three young men stood unwavering, their response a masterpiece of faith and courage. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." Their words were not presumption but trust, absolute confidence in God's power, yet submission to his will, whether he saved them or not. Their faith was not tethered to outcomes but rooted in the character of the God they served. Nebuchadnezzar's wrath boiled over. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter, its flames so fierce that the soldiers tasked with binding the three men perished in the heat. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bound hand and foot, were cast into the inferno, the fire a roaring testament to the king's power. Yet, what happened next defied all reason. As Nebuchadnezzar peered into the furnace, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" He asked his counselors. "Look! I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." There, in the heart of the flames, the 3 walked unharmed, their bindings burned away but their bodies untouched. And with them was a 4th, a mysterious figure radiant with divine glory, a presence many believed to be the pre-incarnate Christ himself. God did not spare them from the furnace, he met them in it, his presence a shield no fire could breach. Astonished, Nebuchadnezzar called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." They emerged, and the gathered officials saw the impossible, not a hair singed, not a robe scorched, not even the smell of smoke upon them. The fire, meant to destroy, had become a stage for God's glory, a testimony to his power and faithfulness. Overwhelmed, Nebuchadnezzar declared, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God." He issued a decree forbidding anyone to speak against their God, and he promoted the 3 to higher honor in Babylon. Their stand had not only spared their lives but turned a pagan king's heart to acknowledge the Most High. This account is a blazing testament to the God who walks with his people through the fiercest trials. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced a furnace not unlike the pressures we encounter, demands to conform, to bow to the idols of our age, whether they be success, approval, or safety. Their courage challenges us. Where are we tempted to compromise our faith? Their trust, unwavering even in the face of death, beckons us to anchor our hope in God's presence, not merely his deliverance. They did not know if God would save them from the flames, yet they knew he was worthy of their allegiance. This story whispers a profound truth: God may not always remove the fire, but he promises to be with us in it, his presence a refuge stronger than any threat. Their shared stand also reminds us of the power of community. Together, they were unbowed, their faith strengthened by fellowship. What furnaces do we face today? Are we trusting God to walk with us, to transform our trials into testimonies of his glory? Let their story ignite our hearts to stand firm, to trust boldly, and to live as witnesses of a God whose power no fire can dim. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. So begins the astonishing testimony of a king whose heart was transformed by the hand of God. The ruler of Babylon's golden empire, his palaces adorned with splendor, his power unmatched across the ancient world. Yet, beneath the grandeur, pride festered, blinding him to the truth that all authority comes from the Most High. This is the story of a dream that shook a king, a judgment that humbled him, and a restoration that turned his voice into a herald of God's eternal dominion, a tale that unveils the danger of pride and the mercy of a God who seeks not to destroy but to redeem. Was at rest in my house, and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. The mighty king, secure in his opulence, was unsettled by a vision that pierced his peace. He saw a tree, vast and magnificent, its height reaching the heavens, its branches spreading across the earth. Its leaves were fair, its fruit abundant, providing food for all. Shelter for beasts, and nesting places for birds. But then a holy watcher descended from heaven, proclaiming, "Cut down the tree, lop off its branches, strip its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. Yet leave the stump in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts until 7 times pass over him." The decree was chilling. Let his heart be changed from that of a man, let him be given the heart of a beast. Nebuchadnezzar awoke, his spirit troubled, knowing this was no ordinary dream but a divine warning. He summoned his magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, but none could unravel the vision's meaning. At last, Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, entered the court, a man known for the spirit of the holy gods within him. Nebuchadnezzar recounted the dream, his voice heavy with unease, hoping Daniel could pierce the mystery. Daniel, hearing the vision, stood silent, his heart troubled, for the meaning was clear and dire. "My lord," he said, "may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation fall upon your enemies." With humility and courage, he revealed the truth. The great tree was Nebuchadnezzar himself, his empire towering over the earth, his rule providing for nations. But the decree to cut it down was God's judgment on his pride. "They shall drive you from men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses." Yet, in mercy, the stump would remain, a promise of restoration if the king humbled himself. Daniel pleaded with urgency. "O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity." His words were a lifeline, a call to repentance, an invitation to turn from pride to humility. But Nebuchadnezzar, consumed by his own glory, let the warning fade. 12 months later, as he walked on the roof of his royal palace, surveying Babylon's splendor, he boasted, "Is not this great Babylon, that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?" In that moment, pride claimed its victory, and God's judgment fell. A voice from heaven declared, "The kingdom has departed from you. They shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field." They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses. Instantly, Nebuchadnezzar's world unraveled. The king who once commanded nations was driven from his throne, his mind stripped of reason, his body reduced to a beastly state. His hair grew like eagle's feathers, his nails like birds' claws, and he roamed the wilderness, grazing like cattle, soaked by the dew of heaven. For 7 years, the mighty ruler lived as a living parable of pride's folly, a man humbled to the dust. Yet, God's purpose was not destruction but transformation. At the end of the appointed time, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes to heaven, and his understanding returned. His first act was worship. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" The king who once exalted himself now exalted God. His heart transformed by the humbling hand of the Almighty, restored to his throne, Nebuchadnezzar's honor and splendor returned, greater than before. But more than a kingdom, he gained a testimony. Praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice. And those who walk in pride he is able to put down. This was no mere recovery, it was a spiritual awakening, a pagan king brought low to proclaim the sovereignty of the Most High. His story is a mirror held before us, reflecting the peril of pride and the power of God's mercy. Nebuchadnezzar's downfall began when he claimed glory for himself, forgetting that every breath, every crown, every achievement is a gift from God. Yet, in judgment, there was grace, a stump left rooted, a promise of restoration for a heart that repents. This account challenges us to search our own hearts. Where have we built our own Babylons, claiming credit for what God has given? Are we trusting in our strength, our success, our plans, or are we lifting our eyes to the one who reigns over all? Nebuchadnezzar's journey from pride to praise reminds us that God's discipline is not rejection but an invitation to return to him. His mercy waits for those who humble themselves, offering restoration beyond what we could imagine. The king's transformation beckons us to live with humility, to acknowledge God's sovereignty in every corner of our lives, our work, our relationships, our dreams. What would it look like to lift our eyes to heaven today, to surrender our pride and trust the God whose kingdom endures forever? Let Nebuchadnezzar's story inspire us to walk humbly, to seek righteousness, and to proclaim the wonders of a God who humbles the proud and exalts the faithful, turning even the heart of a king into a testimony of his everlasting dominion. The king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. A lavish banquet hall in Babylon, glittering with opulence, echoing with laughter and the clinking of goblets. Belshazzar, successor to Nebuchadnezzar, presided over this spectacle, his heart swollen with pride, his kingdom seemingly untouchable. Yet, on this night, amidst the revelry, a divine reckoning loomed, ready to pierce the illusion of invincibility. This is the story of a feast turned to fear, a hand that wrote judgment on a wall, and a faithful prophet who spoke truth to power, a tale that unveils the fragility of human arrogance and the unyielding justice of a God who weighs every heart. While Belshazzar tasted the wine, he commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. They drank wine, and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. The audacity was breathtaking. These sacred vessels, once consecrated for worship in God's holy temple, were now defiled in a drunken act of sacrilege. Belshazzar, fully aware of their origin, used them to toast pagan idols, mocking the God of Israel. This was no mere indulgence, it was defiance, a deliberate challenge to the Almighty, whose power had humbled his predecessor. The banquet hall, filled with the clamor of false worship, became a stage for divine confrontation. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. Silence fell like a thunderclap. The revelry stopped, the music died, and every eye turned to the mysterious hand, its fingers etching words into the palace wall, illuminated by the flickering light. Belshazzar's face drained of color, his body trembling, his royal bravado crumbling before a message he could neither read nor comprehend. The words stood as an enigma, a divine verdict hanging over the feast. In that moment, the king who mocked God faced the terror of his presence. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. He spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing, and tells me its interpretation, shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." But the wise men, despite their boasts of knowledge, stood powerless, unable to decipher the writing. Their failure deepened Belshazzar's fear, his court thrown into chaos. Then the queen, perhaps his mother, remembering a faithful servant from Nebuchadnezzar's reign, spoke of Daniel, a man in whom is the spirit of the holy God, renowned for unraveling mysteries. Summoned from obscurity, Daniel entered the hall, his presence a stark contrast to the panic around him. The king offered riches and rank, but Daniel, unmoved by earthly rewards, refused them. His mission was not for gain but to declare the truth of God. Before interpreting the writing, Daniel recounted Nebuchadnezzar's story, a king lifted high, then humbled low until he acknowledged the Most High's sovereignty. "But you his son, Belshazzar," Daniel said, "have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you, and your lords, your wives and your concubines, have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know, and the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified." Daniel's words were a scalpel, cutting through Belshazzar's pride, exposing his defiance. He had known of God's power, yet chose to scorn it, defiling what was holy and exalting what was false. Then Daniel unveiled the writing's meaning. God has numbered your kingdom, and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances, and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided, and given to the Medes and Persians. Each word was a hammer blow, a divine pronouncement of judgment. Belshazzar's days were counted, his worth tested and found lacking, his empire torn asunder. That very night, the prophecy was fulfilled. Cyrus the Great, leading the Medo-Persian army, diverted the Euphrates River, slipped into Babylon undetected, and seized the city. Belshazzar was slain, and the Golden Empire fell, its glory reduced to dust before the God who rules over all. This story is a sobering mirror, reflecting the peril of ignoring God's sovereignty. Belshazzar's feast was a microcosm of human pride, lavish, defiant, blind to the reality that every breath is a gift from God. His desecration of the temple vessels was not just an act of irreverence but a rejection of the lessons etched in Nebuchadnezzar's humbling. The handwriting on the wall stands as a warning: God sees, God weighs, God judges. Yet, in his justice, there is mercy, an opportunity to learn from the past, to humble ourselves before it is too late. Daniel's faithfulness, standing firm in a court that sidelined him, challenges us to speak truth boldly, to live with integrity even when the world dismisses us. His refusal of rewards reminds us that our calling is to glorify God, not to chase fleeting honors. What walls bear writing in our lives today? Are there warnings we've ignored, moments where pride has blinded us to God's authority? Belshazzar's fall beckons us to examine our hearts. Do we honor the one who holds our breath, or do we chase idols of success, comfort, or control? The story assures us that no kingdom, no matter how grand, can stand against God's justice, yet it also whispers of his patience, giving us time to turn to him. Daniel's unwavering witness in a godless court invites us to live as lights in a world that often mocks what is holy. Let this account stir us to humility, to learn from the past, and to trust the God whose kingdom endures forever. For just as he wrote the end of Babylon's story, he holds ours, calling us to live for his glory, knowing that his justice is certain, his mercy is near, and his dominion is eternal. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these, 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. The vast Medo-Persian Empire, its dominion stretching across nations, its administration a complex web of power and ambition. Darius, the new king, had conquered Babylon, and now sought to govern with order and strength. At the heart of this empire stood Daniel, an aging exile whose wisdom and integrity had outlasted the fall of one kingdom and earned him favor in another. Elevated to one of the 3 highest positions in the land, Daniel's excellence shone so brightly that Darius planned to set him over the entire kingdom. Yet, in this moment of divine favor, a trap was being woven, a plot born of jealousy that would test Daniel's faith in the face of death. This is the story of a man whose devotion defied decrees, a den of lions silenced by God's power, and a testimony that turned a king's heart to worship, a tale of unwavering prayer and unshakable trust in the God who delivers. Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. His integrity was unassailable, his work faultless, his character a beacon in a court rife with intrigue. But such favor stirred envy. The other governors and satraps, unable to find fault in Daniel's conduct, schemed to strike at the heart of his strength, his devotion to God. They devised a cunning plan, appealing to Darius's pride. "King Darius, live forever," they declared. "All the governors, administrators, satraps, counselors, and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree, that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions." Flattered, Darius signed the decree, unaware it was a trap aimed at one man alone. The law of the Medes and Persians, once enacted, was irrevocable, binding even the king himself. The stage was set, the den prepared, its lions a roaring threat to any who dared defy the king's command. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Daniel, fully aware of the decree and its deadly consequences, faced a choice: silence his prayers to save his life or continue his lifelong habit of seeking God, no matter the cost. There was no hesitation. 3 times a day, as always, he opened his windows toward Jerusalem, a city in ruins yet still the heart of his people's hope, and knelt in prayer. This was no act of defiance, no show of rebellion, it was devotion, pure and unshaken. Daniel's prayers were the rhythm of his life, the anchor of his soul, a communion with the God who had sustained him through exile, fire, and visions. To cease praying would be to deny the one who held his life, and Daniel would not, could not, betray that bond. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. The conspirators, watching like vultures, caught him in the act they had engineered. They rushed to Darius, reporting, "Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." Darius, realizing he had been manipulated, was deeply distressed. He esteemed Daniel, valued his wisdom, and sought every way to deliver him, but the law was unyielding. As the sun set, the king gave the order with a heavy heart. Daniel was cast into the den of lions, a stone sealed over its mouth. Yet, even in his anguish, Darius clung to a flicker of hope, calling out, "Your God, whom you serve continually. He will deliver you." That night, the king fasted, sleep fleeing from him, his heart torn between the law he could not change and the man he could not save. At dawn, Darius hurried to the den, his voice trembling with urgency. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" From the depths came a voice, calm and triumphant, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him, and also, O king, I have done no wrong before you." The king's relief was boundless. He commanded Daniel be lifted from the den, and not a scratch was found on him, because he believed in his God. The lions, ravenous for flesh, were silenced by divine power, their mouths shut by an angel's hand. The conspirators, however, met the fate they had planned for Daniel, thrown into the den where the lions overpowered them before they reached the floor. God's justice was swift, his deliverance undeniable. Darius, awestruck, issued a decree to all peoples, nations, and languages: men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, his kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and into the reign of Cyrus, his life a living testimony to the God who saves. This story is more than a miraculous escape, it is a beacon of unwavering faith. Daniel's prayers were not a ritual but a lifeline, a daily surrender to the God who held his life. His courage challenges us: where are we tempted to silence our faith to avoid conflict or loss? His consistency in prayer, even under threat of death, beckons us to root our lives in communion with God, trusting him to shut the mouths of the lion. Face, whether fear, opposition, or temptation, this account reveals the power of a life anchored in God's presence. Daniel's open windows, facing Jerusalem, were a symbol of hope, a reminder that God's promises endure even in exile. His deliverance was not just for his sake but for the glory of God, turning a pagan king's heart to proclaim the living God's power. What lions roar in our lives today? Are we praying with the same boldness, trusting God's presence over our safety? Daniel's story assures us that God is with us in the den, his angels at work, his power greater than any threat. It calls us to live as witnesses, to stand firm in faith, and to trust that the God who rescued Daniel is the same God who walks with us, transforming our trials into testimonies of his enduring dominion. Let this story stir us to pray without ceasing, to trust without wavering, and to proclaim the God whose kingdom will never fall. In the first year of Belshazzar king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Here is Daniel, now an elder statesman in Babylon, his heart still tethered to the God who had guided him through exile, fire, and lions. As he lay in the stillness of the night, God drew back the curtain of time, unveiling a vision so vivid, so cosmic, that it shook him to his core. This is no mere dream but a divine revelation, a sweeping panorama of empires rising and falling, of beasts clashing in a turbulent sea, and of a throne ablaze with eternal glory. It is a story of God's unshakable sovereignty, a promise that no earthly power can rival the kingdom of the Most High, and a call to anchor our hope in the one who reigns forever. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The sea churned, wild and restless, a symbol of the chaos of human history. From its depths emerged four beasts, monstrous and terrifying, each a shadow of empires to come. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings, majestic yet humbled as its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted to stand like a man, given a human heart. This was Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's empire, once soaring in glory, brought low by God's hand until it acknowledged his rule. The second beast, like a bear raised up on one side, gripped three ribs in its mouth, a voice urging it to devour much flesh. This was the Medo-Persian Empire, lopsided in its dual power, ravenous in its conquests of Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. The third, a leopard with four wings and four heads, swift and cunning, was Greece, its speed reflecting Alexander the Great's conquests, its heads foretelling the division of his empire into four. Then came the fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, with iron teeth that devoured and broke in pieces, and 10 horns on its head. Unlike the others, this was Rome, unmatched in might, its horns signaling future rulers or kingdoms. As Daniel watched, a little horn arose, uprooting 3 others, with eyes like a man and a mouth speaking pompous words, a figure of blasphemy and defiance. Amid the chaos of these beasts, the vision shifted to a scene of transcendent glory. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire, a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Here was God himself, eternal, majestic, his throne ablaze with justice, surrounded by countless angels, ready to judge the nations. The beast's dominion was stripped away, their power consumed by fire, their reign temporary before the one who rules forever. Then Daniel saw one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Daniel's heart was troubled, his spirit overwhelmed by the vision's weight. He approached one standing by, likely an angel, who explained, the 4 beasts were 4 kingdoms rising from the earth, but their power would fade. The saints of the Most High would receive the kingdom and possess it forever. The 4th beast, with its 10 horns, would give rise to the little horn, yet his dominion would be broken, his time limited, for the Ancient of Days would render judgment, and the kingdom would be given to the saints, eternal and unshaken. This vision is a thunderous declaration of God's sovereignty over history. The beasts, fearsome as they were, are but shadows before the throne of the Ancient of Days. The lion, bear, leopard, and iron-toothed monster rise and fall, their power fleeting, their boasts empty. The little horn, with its arrogant words, foreshadows those who defy God, yet even they are subject to his judgment. The Son of Man, radiant with divine authority, points to the Messiah, whose kingdom will crush every earthly power and endure forever. For the exiles in Babylon, this vision was a lifeline, assuring them that their God was not defeated, that his plan was unfolding, and that his kingdom would prevail. For us, it is a beacon of hope in a world of chaos, where empires clash, leaders boast, and oppression rages. The Ancient of Days sits enthroned, his justice certain, his victory sure. This account challenges us to live as citizens of an eternal kingdom. Where do we place our trust, in the fleeting powers of this world or in the one whose dominion never ends? The Son of Man, whom Jesus himself claimed to be, assures us that history is not random but guided by God's hand toward his ultimate purpose. The vision calls us to endure, to stand firm against the pressures of a world that defies God, knowing that the saints will inherit the kingdom. What beasts do we face today, systems, ideologies, or fears that seem invincible? Daniel's vision reminds us that they are temporary, their power limited, their end decreed. Let this story stir us to hope, to trust the God who sees the end from the beginning, and to live with courage, knowing that the Son of Man's kingdom is our true home. His dominion is eternal, his glory unmatched, and his victory certain, calling us to worship, to persevere, and to proclaim the God whose throne burns with justice and whose kingdom will fill the earth forever. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, before Babylon's walls would fall and the golden head of Nebuchadnezzar's dream give way to silver arms, Daniel received another vision. It was not a dream of beasts from the sea but a focused, earthbound vision set in Shushan, the citadel in the province of Elam. Though his body remained in Babylon, Daniel, in the spirit, was transported by the river Ulai, and there the heavens peeled back to reveal a message destined to shape the future of God's people. This is a story of kings and kingdoms, of a defiant ruler who magnified himself against heaven, and of a holy place trampled, yet a time decreed for its restoration. It is a reminder that even when evil seems to triumph, its days are numbered, and the sanctuary of the Lord will be cleansed. Daniel looked and saw a ram standing beside the river. It had 2 horns, both high, but one rose higher than the other, and the higher came up last. The ram charged westward, northward, and southward, and no beast could withstand him, none could deliver from his power, and he did as he pleased and became great. This was the Medo-Persian Empire, with its lopsided union, Media first, then Persia rising higher in strength and dominance. It devoured territory with swift campaigns, conquering Babylon, Egypt, and far lands beyond. But as Daniel watched, suddenly a male goat came from the west, crossing the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. Its speed was staggering. Between its eyes was a notable horn, Alexander the Great. He flew toward the ram with furious power and struck it, breaking its two horns. The ram had no strength to withstand him, and he was trampled without mercy. Greece, under Alexander, would crush Persia with astonishing might and precision, changing the course of history in a matter of years. Yet, as the goat became exceedingly great, its horn was broken. Alexander died young, at the height of his power. In its place came four notable horns toward the four winds of heaven, symbolizing the division of his empire among his generals: Seleucus in the east, Ptolemy in the south, Cassander in the west, and Lysimachus in the north. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, east, and the glorious land. This was not the horn of chapter 7 but a different figure, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a king of the north, who arose from the Seleucid branch. He grew in power and pride, challenging even the heavens. He cast down some of the host and stars, symbols of God's people, and trampled them. He exalted himself as high as the prince of the host and took away the daily sacrifices. In their place, he set up the transgression of desolation, defiling the sanctuary and casting truth to the ground. He prospered for a time, and it seemed evil had triumphed. Then Daniel heard a holy one speaking, and another asked, "How long will the vision be, concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled?" The answer came, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed." A specific period was decreed. Evil's days were not endless. God, though silent, was never absent. The holy place would be restored, and judgment would come. Daniel sought to understand the vision. And suddenly before him stood one like a man. And he heard a man's voice calling, "Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." The angel came near, and as he did, Daniel fell in fear, his strength gone. Yet the angel strengthened him and said, "Understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to the time of the end." Though rooted in history, the vision stretched forward, layered with meaning. Gabriel explained, the ram with two horns was the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat was the kingdom of Greece, the large horn its first king, and the four horns those who arose after. And in the latter time of their rule, when transgressors had reached their fullness, a king shall arise, fierce in countenance and skilled in intrigue. He would destroy the mighty and even the holy people, prosper through cunning, exalt himself in his heart, and by peace destroy many. He would stand against the Prince of Princes, but he would be broken, not by human hands. Daniel was overcome by the vision. He fainted and was sick for days, unable to bear the weight of what he had seen. Yet he rose again and went about the king's business. Though the vision remained a burden on his spirit, too deep to be fully grasped at the time, this chapter is a revelation of history written before it happened, showing us that no ruler, no empire, no act of defilement goes unnoticed by the eyes of the Most High. The rise of Persia, the speed of Greece, the arrogance of Antiochus, each was under divine surveillance, each allowed for a season, and each ultimately judged. The sanctuary may be trampled, but it will not be abandoned. The truth may be cast down, but it will not be extinguished. The Prince of Princes cannot be overthrown. And the people of God, though oppressed, are never forgotten. For us today, Daniel's vision is not just a history lesson, it is a call to trust. When rulers rise who mock holiness, when truth is cast aside, when it seems the enemy prospers, this chapter whispers, it is temporary. Let us, like Daniel, hold fast, remain faithful, and trust in the God who rules both beasts and kings, history and eternity. The first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, Daniel, now an elder in a foreign land, turned his heart to the words of God spoken through Jeremiah the prophet. Daniel, whose face is etched with the weight of decades in exile, yet his spirit ablaze with hope. He read that Jerusalem's desolation would last 70 years, a divine promise that the time of restoration was near. Moved by this truth, Daniel did not sit idle, he poured out his soul in prayer, fasting in sackcloth and ashes, interceding for his people with a fervor that shook the heavens. This is the story of a prayer that bridged earth and eternity. A vision of 70 weeks that unveiled the Messiah's coming, and a promise of redemption that anchors our hope in God's sovereign plan, a tale of confession, divine precision, and unshakable faith in the God who restores. Daniel set his face toward the Lord God to make request by prayer and supplications, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. His words were not casual but a cry from the depths, "O Lord, great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant and mercy with those who love him, and with those who keep his commandments, we have sinned and committed iniquity, we have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing from your precepts and your judgments. Neither have we heeded your servants the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes, to our fathers and all the people of the land." This was no distant plea, it was a confession raw and unflinching. Daniel, though righteous, included himself in Israel's guilt, standing in solidarity with his people. He acknowledged their rebellion, their refusal to listen to God's warnings, and the just consequences that had scattered them in exile. Yet, he clung to God's mercy, pleading, "O Lord, according to all your righteousness, I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city Jerusalem, your holy mountain. Because for our sins, and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people are a reproach to all those around us." As Daniel prayed, his heart fixed on God's glory and his promise to restore, the heavens responded. While he was still speaking, Gabriel, the angel who had unveiled the vision of empires, appeared, swift and radiant, at the time of the evening offering. "Daniel," he said, "I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplications the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved." The words carried divine weight. Daniel's prayer had been heard from its first utterance, his faithfulness cherished by the God he served. Gabriel delivered a prophecy breathtaking in its scope. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. This was no mere timeline but a divine blueprint, a promise that God's plan would culminate in redemption, righteousness, and the anointing of his holy place. Gabriel unfolded the vision with precision. "Know therefore and understand, that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood, and till the end of the war desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate." The 70 weeks, divided into 7, 62, and 1, mapped history with divine accuracy. From the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, likely under Artaxerxes, the years would lead to the Messiah's arrival, his sacrificial death, and the city's destruction in AD 70. The final week hinted at a future time of covenant and desolation, pointing to an ultimate adversary in God's decisive judgment. This prophecy, staggering in its precision, has captivated hearts for centuries, aligning with Jesus Christ's life, death, and the fall of Jerusalem, while also stretching toward the end of days. For Daniel, it was a lifeline, assuring him that God's mercy would triumph over Israel's sin, that the Messiah would come to atone, and that his kingdom would endure. The vision's scope, spanning redemption, judgment, and restoration, revealed a God who orchestrates history with meticulous care, every detail fulfilling his purpose. Daniel's prayer, humble and fervent, was the spark that drew this revelation, showing the power of intercession rooted in God's word. His confession teaches us that true prayer owns our failures, seeks God's glory, and trusts his promises, even when the answer lies beyond our lifetime. This account is a beacon of hope and a challenge to faith. Where do we need to stand in the gap, confessing the sins of our communities and pleading for God's mercy? Daniel's vision assures us that God hears every prayer, numbers every moment, and fulfills every promise. The 70 weeks remind us that history is not random but guided toward redemption, with Jesus at its heart. What trials tempt us to doubt God's plan? This story calls us to trust His timing, to pray with persistence, and to live with expectancy, knowing the Messiah has come and will come again. Daniel's faith, poured out in sackcloth, invites us to seek God with the same intensity, to anchor our hope in His eternal righteousness. To anchor our hope in His eternal righteousness, and to proclaim the God whose plan unfolds with breathtaking precision. Let this vision stir us to intercede, to trust, and to live for the one whose kingdom will never fail, whose mercy redeems, and whose glory fills the earth forever. In the 3rd year of Cyrus king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message, and had understanding of the vision. Envision a twilight scene by the Tigris River, where Daniel, now in the twilight of his years, stands alone, his heart heavy with the weight of his people's struggles. The Babylonian Empire has fallen, and some Jews have returned to Jerusalem, yet opposition dogs their efforts to rebuild. In this moment of quiet burden, God parts the veil between earth and heaven, unveiling a vision that pierces the unseen realm. This is the story of a man's persistent prayer. A celestial battle that delays an angelic messenger, and a glimpse into the spiritual warfare that shapes history, a tale of faith that perseveres, trust in God's unseen work, and the assurance that no battle escapes the sovereignty of the Most High. In those days, Daniel mourned for 3 weeks, eating no pleasant food, no meat or wine touching his lips, humbling himself before God. His fasting was no ritual but a cry from the depths, a plea for understanding and mercy for his people. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as he stood by the great river Tigris, a figure appeared, radiant and otherworldly. Clothed in linen, his waist girded with gold of Uphaz, his body gleamed like beryl. His face flashed like lightning, his eyes blazed like torches, and his arms and feet shone like polished bronze. His voice roared like a multitude, a sound that shook the air. Those with Daniel, though they saw nothing, trembled with terror and fled, leaving him alone, his strength drained, his body collapsing under the weight of divine glory. This was no mere angel but a messenger of heaven, his presence a bridge between the mortal and the eternals. A hand touched Daniel, raising him to his hands and knees, and a voice spoke, gentle yet commanding, "Daniel, man greatly beloved, stand upright, for I have been sent to you." Trembling, Daniel rose, and the messenger continued, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand, and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia." The revelation was staggering. A demonic force, the prince of Persia, had resisted the angel, delaying his mission until Michael, the archangel, intervened. This was no earthly struggle but a cosmic battle, unseen yet intertwined with the events of nations, a clash of spiritual forces shaping the fate of empires. The messenger spoke further, "Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision pertains to many days yet to come." Daniel, overwhelmed, turned his face to the ground, speechless, his strength sapped. Again, the angel touched him, strengthening him, saying, "O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be to you, be strong, yes, be strong." Revived, Daniel responded, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." The angel revealed his mission, to return to the fight against the prince of Persia, and soon to face the prince of Greece, foreshadowing the rise of a new empire. "But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth," he added, "and no one upholds me against these, except Michael your prince." The vision closed with a promise of further revelation, a glimpse into God's plan for Israel and the future, rooted in divine truth. This account unveils a realm where angels and demons contend, where human prayers ignite heavenly battles, and where God's purposes prevail despite opposition. Daniel's 3 weeks of mourning were not in vain. His prayers, offered in humility, reached God's throne from the first day, sparking angelic action. The delay, caused by the prince of Persia, was not God's absence but a testament to the unseen warfare that surrounds his people. Michael's intervention, defending Israel, assures us that God's covenant endures, his angels vigilant. For Daniel, this vision was a lifeline, revealing that the struggles of Jerusalem's restoration were part of a larger spiritual conflict, yet under God's sovereign control. It strengthened his resolve to trust, to pray, to persevere, knowing God was at work beyond what eyes could see. This story pulses with timeless truth. It beckons us to pray with persistence, even when answers tarry, trusting that God hears every word. The celestial battle reminds us that our struggles, personal, communal, or global, are often rooted in unseen conflicts, yet never beyond God's reach. Where do we grow weary, doubting God's response? Daniel's faith, unwavering through delay, challenges us to hold fast, to seek God with humility, and to trust His timing. The angel's words, "Greatly beloved," echo to us, affirming that our prayers matter, our lives are seen, and our battles are fought by heaven's hosts. A radiant messenger from heaven appeared, continuing the revelation begun by the river Tigris. The air shimmered with divine weight, and Daniel, his heart attuned to God's voice, received a prophecy so intricate, so precise, it wove together the fates of kings and nations, stretching from his day to the distant horizon of time. This is the story of clashing kingdoms, a contemptible ruler's defiance, and the ultimate triumph of God's eternal plan, a vision that unveils the meticulous sovereignty of the Most High, calling us to trust His purpose through history's tumult and to anchor our hope in the victory that awaits His faithful. The angelic messenger, strengthened by Michael's aid, spoke of truths inscribed in the scripture of truth, unveiling what would befall Daniel's people in the latter days. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. The Persian Empire, already vast, would grow under Cyrus's successors, Cambyses, Smyrtis, and Darius I, until Xerxes, the 4th, amassed wealth and power to provoke Greece, igniting a rivalry that would reshape the world. Then, a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will, a vivid portrait of Alexander the Great, whose Greek empire would blaze across the earth. Swift and unstoppable. Yet, when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, foretelling Alexander's sudden death and the splintering of his empire among his 4 generals, none inheriting his singular glory. The vision narrowed, detailing the relentless conflicts between 2 of these fragments, the kings of the south, the Ptolemies of Egypt, and the kings of the north, the Seleucids of Syria. Alliances forged through marriages would crumble, betrayals would abound, and battles would rage over generations. At the appointed time, a king of the south shall attack, but the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. The north would prevail, sweeping through lands, yet face setbacks, turning its wrath against the Holy Covenant. A ruler would emerge, his heart exalted against the Holy Covenant, defiling the sanctuary, abolishing the daily sacrifices, and setting up an abomination that desolates. This was Antiochus IV Epiphanes, whose desecration of Jerusalem's temple, erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing unclean animals, sparked the Maccabean revolt, a cry of faith against oppression. Yet, the vision stretched beyond Antiochus, its language swelling to a figure yet to come. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, but this latter king, contemptible and cunning, would exalt himself above every god, and speak blasphemies against the God of gods. His power would thrive through deception, amassing wealth and dominating nations, yet he shall come to his end. And no one will help him. This ruler, a shadow of the ultimate Antichrist, would invade the glorious land, conquer many, and plant his tents between the seas and the holy mountain, only to meet his doom by divine decree. The prophecy's precision, foretelling Persian kings, Greek conquests, Seleucid Ptolemaic wars, and Antiochus's sacrilege, staggers the mind, yet its gaze toward a final adversary assures us that no rebellion escapes God's judgment. Amid the clash of empires and the rise of blasphemers, a thread of hope shone through. The people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits, and those who understand would instruct many, though some would fall by sword, flame, or captivity, refined by trials for the appointed time. This was a promise for the faithful, those who, like the Maccabees, resisted Antiochus, and those who, in future days, would stand firm against ultimate evil. Their strength was not in arms but in knowing God, their exploits rooted in faith, their trials a path to purity. For Daniel's people, this vision was a lifeline, assuring them that God saw their suffering, numbered their days of oppression, and would raise up deliverers. The prophecy's dual focus, near events fulfilled with eerie accuracy and distant ones yet to unfold, revealed a God who orchestrates history with breathtaking care. This account is a clarion call to trust in God's sovereign hand. The rise and fall of kings, the betrayals and battles, are not chaos but threads in his tapestry, woven toward his purpose. Antiochus's abomination, like the future desolators, is temporary, God's justice is eternal. The vision challenges us: where do we see powers or systems that defy God, tempting us to fear? The faithful who know their God remind us to stand firm, to act with courage, and to trust that our trials refine us for His glory. What conflicts, personal or global, seem overwhelming? This story assures us that God sets the boundaries of every empire, limits every ruler's reign, and strengthens His people to endure. The prophecy's precision invites us to marvel at God's foresight, to anchor our hope in His promises, and to live as witnesses of His kingdom, unshaken by the storms of history. Let this vision stir us to know our God deeply, to stand boldly, and to proclaim the one whose plan prevails, whose justice triumphs, and whose glory will fill the earth forever. The angel declared, "At that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book." A storm of unprecedented anguish would engulf the world, yet Michael, Israel's guardian, would rise to defend God's covenant people. Deliverance was certain for those whose names were inscribed in the book of life, a divine registry of the faithful. The vision soared beyond tribulation, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Resurrection awaited, life eternal for the righteous, judgment for the wicked, and a radiant glory for those who led others to God's truth, their legacy sparkling like the heavens. The angel commanded Daniel, "But you, seal up the book, until the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." The prophecy was to be preserved, its full meaning unveiled as history neared its climax. Daniel, standing by the river, saw two others, one on each bank, and heard one ask, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" The angel raised both hands to heaven, swearing by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. The cryptic measure, 3.5 years, pointed to a season of intense trial, yet its end was fixed, God's purpose unyielding. Daniel, seeking clarity, heard the angel say, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." A final promise followed: from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits, and comes to the 1,335 days. But you, go your way till the end, for you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. Daniel's role was complete, his rest was near, his reward secure in the resurrection. This story is our story, a call to stand firm, to pray boldly, to trust deeply. Daniel's life whispers to us, where are we tempted to conform, to silence our faith, to despair in trial? His courage beckons us to choose God above all, to seek Him in the face of lions, fires, or the chaos of a world unmoored. The visions assure us that history is His, every empire temporary, every evil bounded, every promise sure. The resurrection awaits, our inheritance secure, our lives destined to shine if we know our God and lead others to Him. In a world running to and fro, let us be the wise, purified by trials, radiant with hope, anchored in the God who sees the end from the beginning. If this journey through Daniel's life has stirred your soul, ignited your faith, or unveiled God's glory in new ways, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to stay connected with more stories that illuminate Scripture's power. And share this with others, friends, family, or anyone seeking hope in a turbulent world. Together, let's spread the light of God's Word, inspiring hearts to trust the one whose kingdom endures forever, whose justice prevails, and whose love transforms every faithful life into a star that shines for eternity.